This Friday night, you might grab an IPA at a local craft bar to unwind. You will clink glasses with friends in total safety, never once questioning what is inside your cup. But for 99.9% of human history, a drink wasn't meant to relax you. It was a biological weapon. It was designed to push human limits to the absolute edge of death. So, why did our ancestors deliberately mix their alcohol with lethal poisons? The answer changes everything we think we know about power, rituals, and what it means to survive. Imagine the coastal valleys of Southern California centuries before the first modern cities appeared. A young boy from the Chumash tribe sits barefoot in the cool dirt, trembling slightly. This is the terrifying initiation rite that will define his entire existence. The tribal shamans slowly approach him holding a large, carved wooden bowl. Inside that bowl sloshes a dark, heavily fermented liquid that smells earthy and sharp. But this ancient brew is absolutely not meant for celebration, relaxation, or leisure. Crushed directly into the raw alcohol are the potent roots and seeds of Datura. You might know this beautiful white flower today as the highly toxic Jimson weed. A slight miscalculation in the shaman's dosage causes immediate and massive cardiac arrest. The young man knows the severe danger perfectly well, yet he drinks it without hesitation. Within mere minutes of swallowing the bitter mixture, his body begins violently rejecting the poison. A sudden, intense fever takes over as his heart rate skyrockets to a terrifying pace. His vision rapidly blurs into shadows while the heavy toxins flood into his bloodstream. The fermented liquid acts as a highly efficient and ruthless chemical delivery system. Alcohol is an incredible biological solvent that quickly strips away our natural bodily defenses. It bypasses the stomach lining and forces the dangerous Datura alkaloids straight into his brain. His breathing grows dangerously shallow as the powerful chemical reaction takes full physiological control. He is no longer sitting quietly in the dark dirt of a California valley, because his physical body becomes completely paralyzed while his conscious mind is violently ripped from reality. This terrifying physiological collapse is exactly the reaction that the tribal shamans intended. The alcohol deliberately accelerates his rapid descent toward the absolute edge of biological death. He now hovers helplessly in a terrifying purgatory between the living and the dead. In this extreme state of induced chemical psychosis, the sacred tribal hallucination finally begins. He clearly sees his eternal animal spirit guide emerging silently from the deep shadows. The visceral vision is so incredibly vivid that it instantly overwrites his waking reality. He converses with ancient entities that will dictate his future hunting and healing roles. Surviving this brutal chemical onslaught proves his profound spiritual strength to the entire watching community. When the sun eventually rises, he returns from the dangerous ritual completely transformed. He went into the darkness as a frightened boy and emerged as a reborn man. He has literally looked death in the face and somehow managed to walk away intact. The toxic plant provided the sacred door, and the alcohol forcefully turned the lock. The Native American shamans were absolute masters of this incredibly dangerous botanical chemistry. These tribal leaders were not just priests. They were highly advanced indigenous pharmacists. They understood the lethal synergy between natural poisons and fermentation better than modern scientists. They intentionally weaponized these ancient brews to break down the hard walls of human perception. This terrifying ritual in California is just a tiny glimpse into a massive global phenomenon. Indigenous cultures across the world were playing with lethal biochemical fire long before laboratories existed. But what happens when you scale this deadly chemical practice up to govern an entire empire? To fully understand how this lethal chemistry scales up, you must look at the dark arts of ancient political lobbying. In modern American politics, establishing dominance over rivals usually involves expensive dinners in exclusive VIP rooms or quiet backroom deals. But long before the Incas, the elite rulers of the Wari Empire in South America had a drastically different approach to high-stakes negotiations. They hosted highly restricted, closed-door banquets designed specifically to psychologically break and permanently bind regional leaders. You were absolutely not invited to these elite gatherings to casually relax or discuss trade agreements over food. You were brought in to consume a carefully engineered biochemical cocktail meant to violently shatter your entire perception of reality. The ruling class proudly served massive ceramic vessels overflowing with a traditional fermented corn beer known as chicha. However, this was strictly not your standard ancient alcoholic beverage. According to a groundbreaking 2022 archaeological study published in the journal Antiquity, researchers analyzing the Quilcapampa site in Peru discovered something deeply sinister. The Wari brewmasters deliberately infused their massive vats of beer with the heavily crushed seeds of the Vilca tree. These specific seeds contain lethal concentrations of bufotenin and DMT. These are incredibly toxic and explosively powerful psychoactive compounds. Eating the raw seeds alone would barely work because human stomach enzymes rapidly destroy the chemicals before they can ever reach the brain. So the advanced Wari elite literally weaponized the fermentation process to completely bypass this complex biological defense system. The heavy alcohol in the chicha acted as a perfect chemical solvent that protected the potent toxins and delivered them directly into the bloodstream. The immediate result was a synchronized, hours-long collective hallucination experienced by everyone trapped inside that grand banquet hall. The Wari leaders strategically used this intense, alcohol-fueled psychedelic vulnerability to physically convince visiting tribal chiefs that they possessed literal godlike powers. When you wake up from a terrifying, mind-bending trance completely convinced that your political host commands the actual spiritual universe, you simply do not rebel against them. This was a highly calculated, ruthless display of political dominance brilliantly masquerading as a generous religious festival. They successfully built a sprawling, unified empire across the Andes, not just through sheer military force, but through heavily intoxicating chemical manipulation. This was never a real party. It was a terrifying psychological hostage situation contained entirely within a drinking cup. But here is where the historical record gets even more fascinating. South America was absolutely not the only place where human biology was systematically hacked for ultimate power. How did this global obsession with toxic brewing actually alter the human body in extreme combat scenarios? If you think about a massive Hollywood historical epic or your favorite fantasy video game, you already know the terrifying legend of the ultimate frontline combatant. They are massive, unstoppable soldiers, charging into bloody battlefields completely bare-chested and seemingly immune to catastrophic physical injuries. We commonly call them the legendary Berserkers of ancient Europe. For decades, modern historians simply assumed their fearless battle rage was just pure psychological adrenaline or highly exaggerated cultural mythology. But comprehensive archaeobotanical data reveals a much darker chemical truth. During the brutal Iron Age, Celtic and Germanic tribes were definitely not just drinking standard fermented grain before facing their heavily armed enemies. They deliberately laced their dark battle ales with a highly dangerous, foul-smelling plant called Henbane, scientifically known as Hyoscyamus niger. According to records published in the Journal of Archaeological Science, this was an intentional and widespread military practice. They were utilizing nature's most lethal botanical weapons to build an entirely unstoppable army. Here is the brutal biological reality behind that specific, deadly combination. Henbane is absolutely packed with powerful, toxic alkaloids, specifically containing massive, lethal doses of hyoscyamine and scopolamine. Consuming these potent neurotoxins raw in nature causes severe nausea, terrifying visual delirium, and usually ends in almost immediate biological death. But our tribal ancestors were absolutely not acting like mindless barbarians simply eating random poisonous forest weeds. They were actively functioning as the world's very first extreme biohackers. By carefully brewing toxic henbane directly into heavy, unfiltered alcohol, they created a perfectly calibrated neurochemical delivery system. The thick beer acted as a rapid, aggressive solvent that safely carried the dangerous alkaloids past the digestive system. It forcefully pushed these mind-altering chemicals directly across the blood-brain barrier. Once inside the central nervous system, this toxic cocktail effectively severed the brain's natural ability to register physical agony. The warrior's conscious mind detached completely, replacing natural human fear with a sensation of invincible flight and violently uncontrollable agitation. They were essentially deploying a highly sophisticated pharmacologically induced combat trance to completely dominate the battlefield. This deliberate toxic brewing was never a random cultural accident or a desperate search for a quick, cheap thrill. It was a globally calculated, biologically precise military technology designed to systematically manipulate the human nervous system. We look back at these ancient people intentionally mixing deadly poisons into their daily drinks and confidently label them as completely crazy. But they were actually performing highly advanced neurological engineering. They clearly understood the exact chemical limits of the human brain, and they simply used alcohol to break them. Next time you sit in a dimly lit downtown lounge sipping a perfectly measured, federally regulated cocktail, take a good look at your glass. We have completely sanitized the ancient, terrifying magic of the human brew. For thousands of years, a drink was never meant to help you unwind after a stressful work week. It was a violently powerful biological tool used to conquer rival nations. It forced human minds to speak directly with gods. It permanently altered the course of history. Now, it just makes us sleepy.